So what a wolf dog is when a wolf and a dog have a baby, right? That animal can then have viable offspring. So it's pretty interesting because dogs, wolves, and coyotes are considered different species, but they can actually have babies that can then have babies. So you can have a low content, mid content, or high content wolf dog, and that refers to how much wolf is in that dog. So this animal right here is named Autumn. She is my sweetie. She's at a rescue that I used to work at, and she is a mid-content wolf dog. Now, wolves and dogs look a little bit similar, and that's because dogs evolved from wolves. Every dog evolved from a wolf, but there are some major, major differences between wolves and dogs and wolf dogs. So first of all, I learned this pretty quickly. Wolves don't care what people have to say. So if you tell a dog, or if you tell a wolf, no, you're in trouble, that wolf does not care at all. Of course, if you tell a dog you're in trouble, that dog is going to do what you say. Wolves don't look to humans for information, so they can be very difficult. Wolves have a maximum bite force of 1,500 psi. To put that in perspective, the strongest police dog bites, German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, are about 300 psi. A hyena is like 1,200 psi, so they're very, very strong. And when people ask me what is it like working with wolves and wolf dogs, I say, it's like working with a bunch of really dangerous toddlers because their bite force is so strong. Wolves are very neophobic. That means that they're afraid of new things, and it's the same with wolf dogs. So I have spent a lot of years forming a relationship with the animals that I work with, and yet if I were to go into those enclosures with like a weird hat on or something, those animals would run from me, and then I'd take the hat off and they would love me again, hopefully. But that's a major, major difference between wolves and dogs, is how afraid wolves are of new things. Wolf dogs and wolves are very expensive, very needy, very destructive, and unpredictable. In fact, I was just talking to your band teacher, and I was telling him if I were to choose between wrestling a wolf or wrestling a wolf dog, I would choose to wrestle the wolf because they're a lot more predictable. A wolf dog can be a dog or a wolf that day. You're just not sure. So the reason that I'm telling you all of this is because a lot of people, when they know that wolf dogs exist, they then want a wolf dog themselves. But I'm here to tell you that you do not want a wolf dog, okay? You have to feed them an all raw meat diet. That is very expensive. You cannot take them to the vet. The vet has to come to you. That is very expensive. They destroy everything, and they have the ability to destroy anything with that bite force, so they can be very destructive. And like I mentioned, they can be unpredictable. Now, if you have a lot of money, and you live in the wilderness and you never want to leave your house and you can spend all your time with that wolf dog, maybe a wolf dog is for you. Not for me, that's for sure. But if you are choosing to get a wolf dog, please, I am begging you to adopt. Do not buy. I was just asked, how do you get a wolf dog? How does that happen? People breed them, and then they sell them, and then nobody can take care of them, and so those animals are euthanized. So I say don't buy a wolf dog. But if you have to, or if you know somebody, please adopt. All right, getting off my soapbox on that one. So now we're going to move into the wolf presentation, so howls. So first, I'm going to tell you about Colorado Wild, my organization, our organization, and who I am. Then we'll talk about the ecological benefits of wolves. We'll talk about wolf history, especially in the lower 48 states and, of course, in Colorado, and what's happening with them today. We'll talk about the importance and science behind coexistence. Now, I know most of you probably aren't livestock producers, aren't ranchers, so I'm just going to touch on that, but it is very important. And of course, no wolf presentation would be complete unless I told you what we can all do about this issue. And then finally, we'll have a chance for a short discussion. So hello, we are Colorado Wild. I'm just going to read our mission statement here. It is to connect science with ethics and advocacy to accomplish the restoration and conservation of Colorado's wildlife and wildlands. So that's me. I'm Becca Sue. That's my dear friend Micah. He has since passed, but I loved him very much. He was very old, by the way, about 17. I earned my ecology degree from the University of North Texas. I've been working as a wolf handler, wolf dog handler, wild canids in zoos and rescues for about 6 years now in Colorado. And of course, I work as a science educator doing this. This is our founder. Her name is Delia Malone. She is an ecologist, and she's been walking the lands doing research in Colorado for almost 30 years. The rest of us are a group of advocates and scientists, but the thing we have in common is that we all love wolves. Okay, a little note from Leslie Knope. I hope y'all know who Leslie Knope is. So Leslie says, all I have on my side is facts and science. People hate facts and science. And when I saw that on Parks and Rec, of course, I didn't laugh because it was just a little too true to my life as a science educator. But the purpose of me showing you this silly meme is to tell you that this information that I'm presenting you today came from decades of rigorous peer-reviewed studies, government reports, and speaking to ranchers themselves. So, moving on, what good are wolves anyway, or what are the ecological benefits of wolves? So first of all, it's basic ecology. Wild lands need wildlife. We need our top predators on the landscape in order to keep our ecosystems functioning, which brings us to our next point. Wolves keep ecosystems healthy, and they provide us with ecosystem services with those healthy ecosystems. So y'all know about like the nitrogen cycle and the water cycle and all of that. When we do not have top predators on the land, when we have a broken ecosystem, the earth is no longer able to provide us with clean air, water, and soil. Wolves are especially important in keeping ecosystems healthy. Has anybody heard of the term keystone species? Some of you have. Okay, for those of you who haven't, this is a really good representation of a keystone species. So this right here is called the keystone, and it holds the arch up. So animals that support the entire ecosystem, like wolves, are called keystone animals. If you were to remove that keystone, the arch would fall down, right? It's also a really great metaphor because the keystone needs to be held up by the rest of the ecosystem as well. So it's not like you can go put a wolf out on a barren landscape and it's going to be able to do its job. You know what I'm saying? So we need biodiversity on the landscape, which I believe is my next point. Yes, it is. So biodiversity it's a metric that describes how many different types of plants and animals are on the landscape. Biodiversity is always a good thing because it makes ecosystems more resilient and resistant to stressors like climate change or drought or famine. So how does that work? So let's say you're a deer and you only eat one type of grass, and then that type of grass gets ravaged by an invasive beetle. You're going to starve. But if you're a deer that eats 5 types of grass, because there's 5 types of grass on the land, not just one, and one of those grasses gets ravaged by an invasive beetle, you're not going to starve. So that's one really simplified but really important example of why biodiversity is always a good thing and why we need it in our ecosystems. But that sort of begs the question, how do wolves increase biodiversity? Why are they so important? So I could probably make like a 5-hour presentation on this subject alone, but for the sake of time, I'm going to try and simplify it. So one of the most important ways that wolves contribute to the ecosystem is by moderating herbivore populations. So when we have too many herbivores, or elk, deer, moose, they eat up all the vegetation. So we lose the biodiversity within the vegetation. But also, because there's nothing for the other herbivores to eat, the herbivores die or leave the area. And then when there's no herbivores, there's nothing for the omnivores to eat, right? And then nothing for the carnivores to eat. So by protecting vegetation, wolves really do keep the ecosystems in balance. They are absolutely necessary to our ecosystems. Another important example of how wolves increase biodiversity and support the rest of the food web is with their carcasses. So after wolves pick the bones and eat whatever they want off of their kills, those carcasses then feed an innumerable amount of other species on the land. So, ungulate herd health. So ungulate means hooved animals, so that's like deer, moose, bison, cows, stuff like that. And wild ungulates really need wolves. Now, you're probably out there thinking, hey lady, I know that wolves actually eat elk, so how could they possibly be good for elk? And I see your logic, but it's a bit more complicated than that. Wolves go after the sick, the weak, and the slow ungulates, which means that what's left over is the strongest breeding stock. So sometimes when I'm talking to younger kids, I'll put it like this. Imagine you are out in the wild with your family, prehistoric times, and y'all are hunting cheeseburgers. Only these cheeseburgers, of course, are not the kind you get in the bag at the drive-thru window. They are literally 20 times your size. They have hooves and antlers that can gore and kill you. They can run faster than you. And the only weapon that you have is your face. Are you going to go after the biggest, strongest cheeseburger? No, you're going to choose the cheeseburger that is the least risk to you and your family, which will be the sick, the weak, and the slow. Now, of course, I hope you're seeing my metaphor between elk and cheeseburgers and wolves and people. But it's true. Ungulates really desperately need wolves to keep their herds healthy and disease-free. And we'll talk more about this because it's such a big topic. Wolves also mitigate climate change, first of all, by increasing biodiversity and making ecosystems strong to the effects of climate change, but also by protecting that vegetation. They're protecting the carbon that is sequestered in the soil and in the vegetation. All right, so that was why we all need wolves. Those are kind of a quick overview of the ecological benefits of wolves. But why does Colorado need wolves? Well, so some of my bullet points aren't showing up. That's okay. I'm going to look at my notes here. Okay, so this is where we're going to talk about Yellowstone National Park. Has anybody heard of the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone? Some of you, but not too many. Okay. Wolves were extirpated, that means exterminated from a geographic region, from Yellowstone in the 1920s. That was a deliberate and systematic extirpation of wolves from Yellowstone. They reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone National Park in 1995 and 96. During that about 70-year time period where Yellowstone did not have wolves, we saw a breakdown of the ecosystem, like I touched on before. So because there were way too many herbivores, they ate up all the vegetation. Nothing for the other herbivores to eat, omnivores, carnivores, so on and so forth. But also, there was nothing to hold the rivers in place anymore because the vegetation just disappeared, and so we lost the aquatic ecosystems. So we saw an extreme degradation of biodiversity, so less plants and animals on the landscape. And if my silly bullet points would have shown up, it would have said the Endangered Species Act and SWAP. So in Colorado, we are seeing the same effects that we saw in Yellowstone. And one of the major things that we're seeing is a lack of biodiversity. And we can see that through the Endangered Species Act. So Colorado has 33 species listed as threatened or endangered in Colorado. And then another program that is similar to the Endangered Species Act, it's not worth explaining, it's called SWAP, the State Wildlife Action Plan, and we have over 270 species of plants and animals that are listed as greatest conservation concern in Colorado, and both of those things tell us that we are rapidly losing plants and animals on the land. Let me see, what was my next one? Oh, an overpopulation of ungulates. That would have been my third bullet point here. So we have over 300,000 mule deer, 300,000 elk and 430,000 mule deer in Colorado. That is more than all the states that surround us combined and more than any state in the union. So we definitely have an overpopulation of ungulates in this state. Chronic wasting disease is another reason why Colorado needs wolves. Do we know what chronic wasting disease is? Seems like everybody's like, no, you do? Awesome. Okay, so for those of you that don't, chronic wasting disease is a prion disease. It's kind of like mad cow, and it is 100% lethal to ungulates. So moose, deer, elk always die from this disease. It's particularly dangerous, this disease. Again, it's not worth getting into the weeds on this, but this disease is highly variable, and we're very afraid that it will spill over to infect humans and cows. So no human has ever gotten chronic wasting disease, but we really believe that it is possible that we could. So if you do eat game meat, which I think is delicious, always get your game meat tested for chronic wasting disease. But wolves, like I talked about, go after the sick and the weak, and wolves are an excellent mechanism to decrease chronic wasting disease and other diseases in wild populations of ungulates because they target those animals, because they're easier to catch. Side note, a lot of people think that wolves are like really great at hunting, that they're these like voracious predators that can kill anything. But in reality, their prey is extremely dangerous to them, and they're only successful in the best of times in their hunting 10 to 15% of the time, which is pretty low. Colorado needs wolves because, as well as having an overpopulation of ungulates, we also have an overpopulation of mesopredators. So we have apex predators like wolves, and then we have mesopredators like foxes, raccoons, and coyotes. So I love coyotes. They are my favorite animal. You might think it's a wolf, but it's not. It's a coyote. But they are very different than wolves, and I don't have enough time to talk as much as I would like to about this, but I'm going to give you a quick overview. So wolves and coyotes are very different. Coyotes have overpopulated, whereas wolves have not. Why? First of all, as humans have degraded the landscape and taken away habitat, coyotes are able to adapt, whereas other animals cannot. They are incredible at adapting, whereas wolves are not as good at adapting. So, for example, let me see here. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. So coyotes can actually increase their litter size involuntarily based on how much food is available. That's called compensatory rebound, and it's a major reason why we have an overpopulation of coyotes. So what is compensatory rebound? It's a bunch of fancy science words that means if you kill a coyote, you very well get more and more in its place. And that's because they can increase their litter size through compensatory rebound. Coyotes can be diurnal or nocturnal, whereas wolves are strictly crepuscular. Crepuscular means they're most active at dawn and dusk. Coyotes can live in a group or be singular, whereas wolves are only pack animals. You may have experienced this one. Coyotes are very bold, and they're not that afraid of people, whereas wolves are extremely afraid of people. Coyotes are much more likely to mate with whatever other cute coyote they find on the landscape, whereas wolves are just as likely, maybe even more likely, to kill each other when they meet each other in the wild. And that's because wolves are not as adaptable and they desperately need the resources. Thank you. We also could use tourism money. So Yellowstone National Park, just the park, not the surrounding areas, just for wolf tourism generates $82 million a year, and that number is always increasing, so I feel like we could use that money here in Colorado. Oh, and now my bullet points show up. That's okay. Okay, thank you so much. That was a lot of information. I'm going to pause here and talk about the two most common questions that I get. Number one is, am I going to get eaten by a wolf? So in Yellowstone National Park from 1995 to 2018, we had over 100 million visitors that were like way out there in the backcountry, hiking all around. No one has ever been injured by a wolf in Yellowstone National Park, ever, okay? So bear with me here. How many people, shout it out to me if you want to, how many Americans do you believe die every year by dog attacks? Not many? 5? 200? The answer is 42. It's an average, but it's about 42. Okay, how about cows? 2, 3, a dozen. That was a good guess. It's about 20. Okay, I hope nobody guesses this one. How about lawnmowers? How many Americans die by lawnmower every year? This is from the CDC. 1. The answer is 90. Did you know that? Somebody over there? That's so funny. 90 Americans die by lawnmower every year. Okay, so how many Americans do you think are killed by wolves every year? 0. Yeah, it's 0. Now, how many people have been killed by wolves in North America in the past 150 years? 2. And it's really important to note that both of those situations, those animals had been highly habituated to people, so don't feed wildlife, especially not wolves, okay? This study really sums it up. This is a worldwide study, and they say, it is apparent that the risks associated with wolf attack are above 0, but far too low to calculate. So it's extremely unlikely that you're going to get eaten by a wolf, and if you see a wolf in the wild, consider yourself lucky. Okay, second most common question I get, will wolves decimate the elk? The answer is no, that's a little ridiculous. First of all, elk and wolves have evolved together, so if wolves were going to eat all the elk, we would only know about elk in the fossil record, right, which is obviously not the case. Wolves control their own populations. I have a lot of science to show you, but they do this via 2 ways. One is they kill each other when they come up against territory, so that controls their population through territoriality, but also mom and dad bully everybody else into not having puppies. So you probably heard the term alpha, throw it away. Alpha theory is out. What it means to be an alpha is to be the mom and dad. So let's say we have a pack of 5, mom, dad, and 3 adult offspring. Mom and dad will bully the 3 offspring into not having puppies. That prevents inbreeding as well as assures that there's enough resources for the puppies that come in the spring. And this is from Matt Barnes. He's a kind of famous wolf guy. In general, where wolves are, ungulate populations have increased and remain stable. But don't take his word for it. Here's some data. Real quick, the orange represents wolves, the blue line represents elk, and you can see that they've sort of evened out here. So if wolves were going to eat all the elk, they would go in opposite directions, right? As we had more wolves, we would lose elk. That is not the case. Wolves will not decimate elk. Don't let anybody tell you that. So this guy is one of my favorites. His name is Aldo Leopold. He wrote Thinking Like a Mountain. If you've never read that, you've got to read it. It makes me cry every time. But he says, I thought that because fewer wolves meant more deer, that no wolves would mean a hunter's paradise. But I sensed that neither the wolf nor the mountain agreed with such a view. He was actually a wolf hunter. He participated in the extirpations back in the 1940s. But then he had this epiphany that he tells in Thinking Like a Mountain, and he realized that it was wrong. And he became the father of modern American wildlife conservation. All right, moving into wolf history. So this map represents what the historic wolf range was before European settlers. This map conservatively represents something like 1 or 2 million wolves on the landscape at one time. This is the picture today. So lots more white on this board. So real quick, up here, I'm too short. These are both Canis lupus. Those are the gray wolf. So we have a good population well, I shouldn't say that. We used to have a good population, we'll talk about it, in the northern mountain Rockies where we are. And then we do have a good population over here in the Great Lakes. So these are Canis lupus, the gray wolf. This is Canis lupus bailey, the Mexican gray wolf. And we are very lucky in America to have the only wild population of the other species of wolf, the red wolves. There's only 2, the gray and the red, and we got the red in South Carolina. Now, how many are there? There's like less than 10, something like that. We got about 250 here. If I were to have told you 4 years ago, I would have said up here we have about 5,000. But the exterminations have begun again. That is why I'm here talking to you about it in front of you. And we've lost about half at this point in the past 4 years, which we'll talk more about, but I just wanted to explain that map real quick. This is from 1960. So this is how low their populations got. And you can see we only have that small portion in the Great Lakes area. So what happened to wolves? So when Europeans came over, they brought with them their weapons and their diseases and their stories like Little Red Riding Hood here. And they also brought with them a desire to debilitate the indigenous population, the Native Americans. And they did that by debilitating the landscape, especially the wolves and the bison. So by the 1800s, those exterminations are continuing, and we're seeing American bounty systems. That means that the government was paying people to go kill wolves. In 1886, the U.S. Biological Survey was formed, and unfortunately, those are the folks that exterminated, poisoned, trapped, exploded, whatever, basically all of our American wolves, almost all of them. And in 1940, U.S. Biological became U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which you've probably heard of. It's the agency alive today. Now, U.S. Fish and Wildlife does a much better job at protecting our wildlife than they did when they were U.S. Biological, but we are definitely still feeling the exploitative effects of history. And by 1945, all wolves were gone from Colorado. This is actually a picture of the last wolf in Colorado. So what's happening today? I wish that I could tell you that we have changed our paradigm and that we are no longer waging a war on wolves. That is not the case. I don't like to look at this next picture that I'm going to show you, so if you're particularly sensitive, maybe cover your eyes. It's not gory, but it's very similar to these pictures, only in color. So here it comes. So I can describe this picture as nothing less than a pile of dead wolves. This was completely legal. It was in 2012. And you can see that in front, some of these wolves even have radio collars on them. And again, that was legal and it was in one hunting session, or whatever you call that. Side note, we are not against hunting. I just want to put that out there. Sometimes this kind of comes across like that. Absolutely not. If you're hunting for meat, we are all for that. Okay, so what's happening with wolves today? We're going to start with the Northern Rockies, and this is pretty bad information. I am sorry to have to tell you this. I wish I didn't have to. We are still using horrific and irresponsible methods to exterminate wolves. We have lost thousands of wolves, and we only have a few thousand in the lower 48 states in the past few years. We are still paying bounties in the Northern Mountain Rockies. There are large swaths of states in the Northern Mountain Rockies that have no tag limits or no tag requirement. So that means anybody can go out and kill as many wolves as they want to and potentially even get paid for that. We are aerial hunting, which means running them to exhaustion on helicopters and shooting them when they can no longer run. Like I said, this is pretty difficult information. We are using explosives. We're pouring explosives into puppies' dens. I can't make this up. We're using, thank you. Lures, night vision goggles. You can run them over with snowmobiles. Just recently, this guy got away with torturing one of them. It was big news. We're even paying private contractors to kill puppies in the spring. So that's pretty dark, and it begs the question, are they endangered? Biologically, yes. All of these things could mean the end of the gray wolf in America. So yes, they are endangered biologically. However, if you're asking me politically, are they endangered? You're asking me, are they endangered with a capital E under the Endangered Species Act? The answer is no. And that is for political reasons, not ecological reasons. We've even lost over 25% of our protected Yellowstone wolves in the past few years, and wolves' numbers are steadily declining due to human persecution. All this adds up to the fact that Colorado is absolutely critical habitat for the gray wolf. So what's happening with wolves in Colorado today? So again, 1945, they were systematically extirpated. From 1945 to 2023, we did have several animals wander down from the northern populations, but they were never able to create a viable population of wolves in Colorado. That's because as soon as those wolves wander back over into Utah or Wyoming, they are shot. And in fact, that just happened like this month with one of our reintroduced wolves. Also, poachers and legal hunters hitting them with cars, accidents. We couldn't get a viable population here. So 2023, we reintroduced through Proposition 114, and that means that today, CPW, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife must create a self-sustaining population of wolves in Colorado based on the best available science. That is revolutionary verbiage. And today, we're seeing an improvement. We're moving in the right direction, so we'll talk about this stuff, but we're seeing range riders, non-lethal tools, and official depredation analysis. Oh my. So we're moving in the right direction. We'll talk about it. Okay, that was all the terrible information. Now we're moving into a much happier topic, and we're almost to the end of the information. And we're going to talk about coexistence or non-lethal management. So first of all, what is coexistence? It means not killing wolves. And in this case, it means not killing wolves to protect livestock. I get this question about once a week, and it goes like this. If you're not going to kill wolves, how will you manage them? And that sort of infuriates me because it's a little bit like saying, okay, I want to build a house, and I have all the lumber and all the tools and all the contractors available to me, but I don't want to use any of that. I just want to use this hammer. Right? That doesn't make any sense. Wildlife management is not synonymous with lethal management. We have lots of other tools available to us. We talk about as new, and that is so grateful and so forth. So examples are sites a remote hate, tremulous, we can blast up our fence wouldn't fig fear again, they are very afraid. I'll use light grass. Do double conflict, yes, that's why sometimes a cane pricks dog with collar, the stick, Abby is motive, and death one dog is a big dog collar. And goes showers are where the water on inside the twitch we over here some sheep working this milly but there's dog they barking is light, there's some over there, now I'm gonna go to the is my troll as well. It's for impact and existence, and for autumn's a coexistent because in kills chair beer for again we have 5 on and get shot. Well, dad, my breeds right with the other that. Or those 4 leftover animals will disband and become extremely desperate. Desperate animals go after livestock. That is why it is so important to keep the family unit intact. One reason. Coexisting with wolves is the most effective and efficient method to protect, again, because it is like the most important thing I'm going to say all week. Not killing wolves is the most effective and efficient method to protect livestock from wolves, and that's because they're so afraid of new things, and most of these materials are very cheap and require little to no effort on the part of the livestock producer. I'm going to skip this slide because it's a little bit in the weeds, but this is why we need to keep packs intact. And here's some science. So we have human-caused mortality triggers pack instability in wolves. They can disband. And we also have this is a really great study right there at the end. Weaglis and Peebles, so funny their names. The odds of livestock depredations, that means when a livestock animal is taken by a wild animal, increased 4% for sheep and 5 to 6% for cattle with increased wolf lethal control. So when we kill wolves, it does not protect livestock. What does kill cows? So this is unintended cattle death in the areas of this country where we have wolves and where we have livestock. So the Great Lakes area and the Northern Mountain Rockies. And this is unintended, so like not to slaughter. So we have respiratory problems, 26%, unknown, digestive, calving, weather, disease, blah, 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 blah. Way down here, wolves. So less than 0.2% of cattle were taken by wolves in 2009. That number is probably greatly inflated for two reasons. One, you're not compensated. You don't get money for a coyote kill. Like if a coyote kills one of your cows or sheep, you're not compensated, whereas you are compensated for wolves. And I'm not saying that these people are lying, but it is really hard to tell yourself if this animal that's been dead for a week was killed by a coyote or a wolf. And that's why we need official depredation analysis. These numbers are self-reported. In Colorado, we are using official depredation analysis, so I'll bet you anything we're going to see way lower numbers than this. And if anybody, I shouldn't say anybody, there are people using coexistence methods, but if everybody used coexistence methods, we would probably get this down to 0. Okay, but how do we know coexistence works? So killing wolves doesn't solve the problem. If you have a weakness in your protection and you kill all those wolves, another pack is going to come next year. Here's some science. Killing wolves does not protect livestock. Killing wolves to protect predation on livestock may protect one farm but harm neighbors. It doesn't protect livestock. Predators avoid human presence. And we have these really great examples. We have the Alder Springs Ranch and the Wood River Wolf Project in Idaho, the Anderson Ranch and the Blackfoot Challenge in Montana. There's a lot more people using coexistence, but these guys have really great outreach programs. And again, just to sum up, full circle, it's basic ecology, or keep us function. You guys so much. That do about it. In Colorado, there are 13 wolves in they minor. They have our if you're which to register, we've almost the main sources that we have is the wolf plate. Let's go to wolfplate.org to do that. So now we're moving into the question and answer discussion portion of it. Give me just 1 second, but I'm going to leave this up. The first QR code is to contact the commission. The second QR code is to donate to Colorado Wild. Thank you so much in advance if you'd like to do that. It would fund more talks like this. And then there's our social media. So thank you guys so much. I'm going to hand it over to you, and then we'll do questions.
Hi guys, thank you for sitting so respectfully through that presentation. I really appreciate it. The information you learned today is really important because there's so much misinformation about wolves in Colorado, and it was really important to me and many of the other science teachers here that you guys got this presentation, so thank you so much for coming here today. We really appreciate it. Now, we're gonna open it up for questions, and anybody who does ask a good thought-provoking question will get a PBIS card from me. Adults, you may ask questions as well, but I don't have a PBIS card for you, sorry. Just for the students. But before we start asking questions, while we are asking, 2 wolf dog ambassadors come out on stage. These are wolves and dog hybrids. They are 60 to 65% wolf, the rest of them dog. And in order for them to come out here, we have to be silent. They have been here before. They've been comfortable with the stage, but they've never been here while there's people in the room. So everybody please remain seated, remain quiet, don't make any noise. If the wolves are comfortable, we're gonna walk them down But don't reach out unless the handler tells you that you can, all right? And follow all directions given by the handlers. Miss Nath, are we ready? All right, they're gonna bring them out. So we're gonna be really, really quiet while they come out, and then we'll ask some questions while they're on stage, okay? Hi, Bubba. Good job. Hi, good job. They're both boys. And I'm gonna hand the mic over to their handler. Remember, wolves can be really scared.